Okay, our little task today is to take a walk in to the northwestern part of the property to survey the effects of the fire on that part of Punu Kurunpa. The thing to note in this area is that the slender tea tree was at a late stage of its sear in the succession back to a climax forest. The black wattle, a legume, had started to grow, moving into a later sear. Black wattle, acacia being a nitrogen fixer for the soils. What happens from here, whether the slender tea tree gets a hold again or not, is not of my knowledge. So what you have here is mainly the stems into the middle horizon of slender tea tree. This outcrop of rock just here is in fact granodiorite, which is part of the Bemboka batholith. It cools slowly in underneath existing geology, has large crystals and erodes fairly regularly, as you can see with the scree there. And as said earlier in another video, thus formed the majority of the soils of the Bemboka Valley. This here is a conglomerate boulder that's come down from the Merimbula Group cliffs above us here. And if we look up here, we'll see a heavily damaged example of rock orchid. It will be a struggle for it to come back from the rhizomes because they've been scorched very badly. Halfway up, and it's starting to look like none of this western section of Punu Kurunpa, be it wet or dry, forest type, has avoided the wildfire. You look at the ridges on the other side, you can see where the fire in fact crowned, so spot fires coming from the scorched ridge up there. If this camera's good enough to pick that ridge up, it's been skeletalized, and with the winds on the day, it would have spot fired straight in onto this slope, which is a dry forest type just over this spur line, on the spur line, and it would have just ignited, pre-warmed to some extent, and raced off up the hill to the conglomerate cliffs and over the top into the rest of the park. It's national park either side of us here, and that last slope has proved somewhat of a challenge to this 71-plus-year-old, I'll tell you. She keeps telling me I'm not 25 anymore. Oh well. The western boundary of the property is some 100 metres through to the front. A better view of the mountain grey gum mosaic, the lower story and most of the middle story, which was vigorous to say the least, is gone. The entanglement of vines that you couldn't get through, gone. It's like a bomb's gone off in there. It's all been burnt out. The wet fern gully gone. The little bit of remnant coastal warm temperate rainforest which is down in there has been severely damaged. I didn't film in there with that mess because, quite frankly, it was all I could do to get myself out of there. I was buggered. Glossy black cockatoo, which are an endangered species, and their sole food source is related to the cones of the black she oak and other she oak. Black she oak is common, particularly through the Wadbilliga where this fire's gone. The glossy black are reliant on it. They're in here following the breeding every year in a reasonable numbers. It's always been pleasing to see them. Won't be much for them this year. They're probably going to have to go more to the coast to get tucker now, which will bring them out of the Wadbilliga into populated areas. Desert Creek's just below us. I find I'm in need of water. We're coming through to the creek now. Under normal conditions, this is a very wet area. The current drought came in on us very quickly here. It may have been up in the northwest and up in New South Wales and up into Queensland, but it dropped in on us suddenly and severely. You can see the fire has hit Desert Creek in this area anyway. These are manuka or water gum, a temperate rainforest, ran through just into here above us, and it of course was part of the mountain grey gum sclerophyll system up there. I've had the infrared night cameras here, just up in there, and it's picked up some interesting species. We even were fortunate enough once to catch a glimpse of the long-footed potteroo. Goodness knows where they are at the moment. They would have had the creek for protection, but their habitat has just been ravaged in this area. We've never photographed the quoll, but we have directly sighted quoll. They were common to this area in the cliff line, but we found their scat in here, and one of them got into the habit of showing his distaste of our presence with the construction of the hut down there, which is some 500 metres from where I am now, downstream, by dropping his scat around the entrance ways to that lot. Look at this. This lily pilly has somehow managed to make it through without being too scorched. This is a perennial stream. It is still running. The pools down further and upstream will still be sound. In this area, of course, it's normally running through here quite fast. But, excuse the hands while I have a drink. It's burnt straight down the slope from the hot spot there, up on the ridge line, that northern aspect, slope and ridge line, and just hit here. It would have spotted through in advance and been preheating. What I'm saying is the entire western half of Punu Kurunpa, its most valuable part, environmentally, biologically, has been burnt out. I'll tell you a little yarn about this spot. And I was on my own, but I waded down through here, and I got to here in the water, and I got myself up, and I was just looking over, and a dingo came up the rock here, and we're face to face, and we both made a mistake, and we both shit ourselves. And I jumped back down into here and hobbled away trying to get my balance, and of course it turned and hightailed it. I then realised what an opportunity I'd missed, and I jumped back up here somehow, but of course the dingo, having made a mistake once, won't make it twice, and it was gone, never to be seen again. Downstream from here, seems to have fared better than behind me. There's a large, very old Angophora floribunda down there to the front. If this camera can see it, the light grey bark going all the way up. The property is named after it. It is the spirit of the bush here. But as I say, the western portion of Punu Kurunpa has been burnt out. The thing to remember is that biological systems are a dynamic, subtle, ever-evolving mosaic. What we walked through today just looked like it was all the same, burnt out. The difference was the dominants that were still standing with their leaves. They're a fusion of entity. That is, of life and death. What we're seeing today up there on the western part of the property is a lot of death and harm. But these things evolve. They're a fusion, they're dynamic. And if you look at the tree that Punu Kurunpa is named after there, it was there before Captain James Cook sailed up the coast, the east coast of Australia, and started what became a series of events that has dramatically altered the ecology of this country. But still, that Angophora floribunda stands there to remind us of what might have once been. Now, it doesn't matter what we Europeans do. It's going to outlast us. The problem is, with our arrival, we virtually destroyed the environmental conditioning that first Australian dreaming, their law, L-O-R-E, evolved over some 65,000 years, we now think, in tune with the environmental requirements of areas such as this. Their fire stick methods of patch burning and everything created open forest and maintained species in a balanced way. We've come in and we've stopped burning altogether, or burnt too frequently, too hard, and we've changed the species patterns dramatically and more fire-prone species have grown. That applies to Punu Kurunpa. So when it goes up now, it goes up fast and hard. We of today's generations of European Australians think this is normal, but it's not. And if you take the time to read the journals of even Cook for that matter, but Matthew Flinders, when he came into this area, he talks of the open forests and being able to pass through them. The early settlers came into this area and their cattle got fat on the legumes and grasses that grew in the open forests that the first Australians had maintained with their fire stick technology. The cattle grew fat, so they immediately started to clear all the land, change the environmental consequences and fire regimes to the areas, and we have what we have today. Good-o. As I say, if you don't understand that as a European Australian, read the journals, the diaries, the stories of the early settlers, the memoirs. It's all there. Go to the Mitchell Library. You don't even have to leave home anymore. Get on the computer. Go to the Mitchell Library and ask for it. Open country. When the first fleet sailed into Sydney Harbour, it was the same. They were confronted with open forests you could walk through. The first Australians had burnt it and maintained it. It was their way of developing their country and utilising it. It's recorded in the diaries of Philip. Some early English settlers referred to these areas around Sydney Harbour as English park-like, looking for some way to describe it with the language as they understood things at that time. What comes back to a more climax expression in these areas is for the future to see. What we have in under here is a wombat hole. The fire hasn't got in there. A little bit of fresh or minor flood debris against it here, plus a fallen tree. So it was prone to catching fire. Now, you see, there's a bit of luck. Something, probably a long-nosed bandicoot or something, been scratching around in there, and it actually pulled the leaf back, and it's just mineral earth, so obviously the bark caught fire with the heat, but where it could have really got at it was mineral earth, and maybe, just maybe, that helped. Check around this side of our Angophora. There you go, beauty. Oh dear, this was close. Yeah. Well, we can only be thankful there wasn't any more fuel there. Otherwise it may well have done harm. They are my forebears, and I have benefited from their labour. But may this tree be symbolic of sticking one right up the backside of we Europeans. Cynicism? Yeah. But I've seen a little bit too more than I would have wanted to. I'm ex-army, I've been around, and I'm a veteran of the intrigue and deceptions of the Vietnam War, and I became something I don't like. But what I've always had is a deep and abiding love of Australia and this country. And it's here I wish to die.